Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. My name is Billy Mann, and today I was going to say, a coach from Hollywood after the conversation we had a while ago, but I won't because I'm after strangling it now. I have the wonderful Adey-Jones, and Del, I came across recently myself. This has been fantastic since I started this. I have come across so many people that I've been unaware of in my world, and I've followed some of your podcasts, and particularly we had Dominic Scafidi on ourselves. He's such a gorgeous guy, and it was a podcast that you did that I absolutely loved listening to it. But what I'm going to do, Del, and we'll cut a long story short, is I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, where you're at in the world, and what you're up to, and we'll follow from there then, rather than I getting tangled up in a big introduction.
I love that. Thank you, Billy. I'm going to take a note on that, and I'm going to have my guests introduce themselves too. That's great.
It's cheating.
It's cheating. So wow, where do I begin? Yes, my name is Adey-Jones, and I grew up in North Wales, but I live in just outside LA right now, in a lovely little town next to the ocean called Malibu. Mm-hmm. And it's very foggy here today, but it's usually very sunny and beautiful. And I'm a coach, and yeah, I was just sharing with you, Billy, earlier that prior to coming across the principles, or really I'd come across them in 2009, but again in 2015, I had been a coach in codependency and recovery from narcissistic abuse, due to a very interesting childhood that I had, where I developed my codependency, or my codependent thinking, I should say. And then when I came across the principles, I sort of let that go. There was a misunderstanding that, I heard Bill Pettit talk about, well, there's no personality disorder or no diagnosis. And I thought, oh, I'm not supposed to do this anymore. And I set it aside and just coached principles and did my show, The Insightful Conversations. And then somebody reached out to me about 6 months ago saying, and it was a 3 principles teacher, and she was saying, I'm really confused. I heard you used to, you know a lot about codependency and narcissistic abuse. Can you help me? And we had a conversation, or 2 conversations actually, which she described as life-changing. And she was like, you have to get this out there, looking at codependency through the lens of the principles. And I was like, oh my God, I have, as you said earlier, I'd thrown the baby out with the bathwater. What it was a misinterpretation. I thought that, I was sort of forgetting that when we describe these behaviors, narcissism or codependency, we're talking about a set of behaviors, not the person. So it wasn't like I was diagnosing a person. I was just saying, this is how to make sense out of this cluster of behaviors. And all that is a result of somebody's thinking. So that's pretty much how I came back to it again. And as I said, for the last 6 months or so, my clients, I would say almost now 80% of them are coming to me with this issue around codependency and narcissistic abuse. And it's something that I'm so passionate about, because I had been in regular therapy for close to 30 years, trying to make sense of yes, I know, lots and lots of money. And as I said to you, I came here in 1981.
Rubbing their hands,
yeah, really. And I won't totally say anything bad about my therapy. No. It was very helpful. It took me from being not functioning at all, wanting to commit suicide at 19, to being pretty functional, but it didn't give me the freedom that I was looking for. I did workshops on so many different things. I studied spiritual psychology. I had a master's in that. Everything I kept looking for was not bringing me what I needed. And then in 2015, I started hearing something again, and this time it went a little deeper. And that's really where I saw a huge shift I mean, a massive, I mean, I won't say I don't have certain codependency behaviors every now and again with my children, but not in my relationships, and not how I show up in the world as much anymore at all. So I'm just thrilled to be able to, but before, when I'd coach people, I could see that I knew how to have them felt seen, heard, understood, all of that, but I didn't know how to show them the door out of there. And now with the understanding of the principles, it's like, yay, there is a door. There's a door out of here. You don't have to live like this.
Yeah. Oh, that is so important. You know, the claustrophobic feeling of being in a narcissistic relationship, whether it's a friendship or in a relationship, is often so subtle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And usually so subtle because the narcissistic behavior is so well developed to the point with a person that you're the person that's wrong, or you think you're wrong.
Yeah.
And if I could, just to draw context in this, because I like I told you before, that I have a particular interest in this particular area myself, but we'd say, if I was to ask you to do two things, one is separate the difference between codependency and narcissism as a trait or as a behavior, you know, that because they're conjoined a lot of the time. They tend to come as a pair within a relationship, etc. Yes. But they're not necessarily the same. They're not the same behaviors exuded, for the want of a better description. So I'd look at, you know, and how that affected your life first, and then we'll say how you recognized it, and maybe and the impact of the principles and how it shifted around. So when because people are going to hear this, and I genuinely think that enough of the people, even in this world of the principles, or don't actually have a handle on the nature of narcissism and how subtle and controlling it is, you know, for people to be actually in the grip of it, you know.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, they are often two sides, you know, of that relationship. It does actually make the perfect fit. And I'll start off with codependency first. And often codependent behavior develops in childhood or very early on. There's usually a dynamic either with a narcissistic parent or a parent that could be, for whatever reason, unavailable due to drugs, alcohol, mental illness, or whatever it is. But there's usually somebody that's codependent usually has childhood trauma. And what comes out of that trauma is they feel, when a parent's not available, that's experienced as abandonment from a child. And abandonment is very shaming. It's like I, as a child, they'll go, what was wrong with me? Why did somebody abandon me? It's because I'm broken. There's something wrong with me. So that's where it really starts, right there in that abandonment, whether it's abandonment, as I said, due to alcoholism or a narcissistic parent who isn't able to fully be there for a child, to fully love them unconditionally. Usually their love from a narcissistic parent is, I'll show you love when you reflect back to me what I want to see, whether you make me proud or you're behaving in a way. They don't see their children as separate little beings. They're there to serve them and please them and make them look good, because it's all about making things look good. So, so when you're narcissistic, and it's also, if you have a parent that's either, you know, an alcoholic or something like that, you tend to grow up very hypersensitive. You're always on high alert for danger. You know, when's the mood going to change again? When am I going to be abandoned or attacked or abused? So you become hypervigilant and hypersensitive to other people's moods and emotions. There's usually, again, that sense of self has been damaged. So you feel very dependent on people in your life to be there for you. And so what happens is, as you grow up, you first of all, you are disconnected from the true self. You don't know who you are at your essence. You have this belief system that there's something wrong and broken in you. You then believe that you need other people, stronger people, to take care of you. So what happens is sometimes codependent children grow up into adults that are shame-based. They tend to attach to, you know, what they perceive as strong, dominant types, which is one of the narcissistic traits. As again, they become addicted to other people, basically. And they feel responsible for everybody's feelings and everybody's, you know, if you're taught as a young child, you know, again, withdrawing affection, like you're not giving me what I want, I'll withdraw my affection. You end up thinking, gosh, I've done that. I've caused them to do that. So you tend to think that you're much more powerful than you really are, and that you're causing these reactions in people. So that's sort of a lot of the codependent behavior. And narcissistic behavior it's actually born out of just as much insecurity as the codependent, just as much fear of not being, there's a deep sense inside that they're broken and there's something fundamentally wrong with them. But as a codependent is aware of those feelings, the narcissist creates a false sense of self, an image, a perfect image, and they become so disassociated, they don't even remember the insecurity that built that false image. And that false image is of superiority, we're special, we're better than anybody else, an excessive need for admiration and, you know, being worshipped, very preoccupied with how things look on, you know, outer referenced, how they look in the world, a big disconnect from who they are on the inside. Power dominance is a huge thing, needing to control, again, fear, totally fear-based, that if I don't dominate and control, then I could lose, you know, either my status or that person. So there's a lot of domination going on in the relationship. And usually I always say that the perfect fit with a codependent and a narcissist is that, you know, it's like a seesaw. And, you know, you've got on one side of the seesaw, you've got the narcissist, and on the other side, you've got the codependent. So the codependent is like the seesaw goes down because there's like this lack of self-worth, lack of feeling entitled to anything, accepting breadcrumbs and all that behavior. And then on the other end of the seesaw up here is the narcissist with massive amounts of entitlement, massive amounts of, you know, what perceived power, dominance, and things like that. So you've got that sort of totally, you know, seesaw that's constantly in that one position of.
Yeah, and it makes sense to both personalities that are playing that game in that given moment.
Totally. I mean, codependents base their value on being, you know, of service and winning over people by giving and over giving, you know, to the point where there's resentment. And then narcissists, on the other hand, are I say overtakers. It's like, yes, me, give me more.
Yes.
So that's why the fit. It's like it's an unspoken when you first meet. It's just somebody that likes to receive a lot will obviously hook up with somebody that likes to give a lot. But it's unfortunately it creates an unhealthy dynamic.
It does, doesn't it? And I think as people will listen to this, this is substantially more common than people realize. This is surprisingly common in lots of families where these personalities, I guess this personality trait may show up. And as like an overarching principle of all of this, of all of these lives from the very start, has been that no matter how far you think you're gone, you can always find your way back.
Oh, absolutely.
You know,
100%.
And I'm just for both of these, and I would love to hear you, you know, because you did mention the door and the way out. But it's the same for people who have narcissistic tendencies that tend to recognize their narcissistic tendencies.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
the board can do this.
When 100% in regular therapy, they'll say that, you know, narcissists can't change. And, you know, as a 3 principles practitioner, we know that anybody can change. If they see something differently, if they have an insight, anybody can change. And so, but what I always say is, but there has to be that willingness to want to change and to also, self-reflect. And unfortunately, because of that barrier that a lot of people that own a full-blown narcissistic, behavior, there's often this thing of like, well, I'm winning at life. I dominate, I control, I get things my way. So why would I change it? Why would I look any deeper? But where there is codependence, because of that dynamic, they're often the ones, because they already start off thinking they're, knowing that they feel broken or less than, they will keep going into therapy and keep going into the workshops and the whatever and counseling to try and fix something in their life, because their life is not working out. They are feeling dominated. They are feel unseen in the relationship. They are being, psychologically abused if it's extreme, or physically abused, as I mentioned earlier, yes. And physically abused.
Yeah. And often, and I have seen it enough times myself, working with people and whatever, the physical manifestation of it is quite serious in this. I'm not, that this doesn't, as it were, stop at a slap, which, and don't get me, it should never be an issue. I'm not justifying that at all. But the rage that can often follow it, from that place can be quite frightening.
It can be terrifying, and
quite frightening.
And I also want to say, I am. I'm sorry, I need a cough. Tickle in my throat here.
COVID.
COVID, exactly. I have to say, I was in a number of narcissistic relationships. I'm sick of water to see if my tickle goes. None of them were, I might have had a slap, but it didn't ever go beyond that.
Thankfully.
But I remember thinking at times, oh my God, I wish I had a black eye. I wish I had a broken arm. I wish there was a physical manifestation for the pain that I feel inside, because my brain felt like scrambled eggs. I was in so much confusion, so much pain. It was debilitating, absolutely debilitating, but you have nothing to show for it. And you feel like you're going crazy. And yes, it's not as, well, I shouldn't even say that. I was about to say it's not as life-threatening as physical abuse, but I know people that take their lives because they are in so much mental anguish from being in a toxic relationship like this. They've lost all sense of themselves, all belief in themselves, that they are strong enough to make it without the person. And a lot of people, again, that shame, how could I have let this happen to me? How could I be the shallow shell of the person I once was? And what I love to do when I work with people is to really show them that there is no shame. And there's mitigating factors maybe from childhood, and I don't go back in and re-diagnose everything, but I do like to see where that thinking first took root. It's so important. And when you show somebody that they innocently, started to sort of believe something about themselves, and they've carried that through time, and that there's actually a chemical or brain chemistry that happens when you're in a psychologically abusive relationship that creates this sort of chemical cocktail of oxytocin, adrenaline, dopamine, all this thing. And that cocktail is what contributes to you not being able to disconnect from that painful relationship. And when I have people understand who they are at their essence, where the simple misunderstanding took place, and that they shouldn't feel guilty and they can change their lives, it's incredible. It's just amazing. So,
yeah, I repeat this regularly. There is nothing like that moment when someone goes, oh, and they get it.
Yeah.
And they get it, that they realize that in this instance, there's a way out. that, oh, I'm not actually broken.
Yeah, totally.
No, you're not broken. Oh, I get it. You know, because you know in that nanosecond, their life is never going to be the same.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
that instant, everything changes. It might be slow, it might be the 1%, but it's still the 1% in the other direction that eventually leads out that way. And it's incredible, the recovery that people make.
And two other things I think for me are really what really, and I told you, I mean, I grew up, you know, I was illegitimate. I thought I should never have been born. I had this whole story that, you know, I wasn't equal to others. And
well, look at you still. That's all I got to say about that. You know, look at us.
Yes, I love that. But I just believe that. I really believe that. And I tried for so many years. Oh my God, I mean, my first workshop, I think I told you when I came here in 1981, was Healing the Shame That Binds. I was like, shame, yes, me, sign me up for that. And I worked so hard all through my 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s even, to try and not feel that shame, to try and believe that I was equal to other people. And when I came across the principles, and I'd heard it, I think I told you, I've been in every spiritual practice from Kabbalah to Hinduism to Native American to everything. Yes, we're all born equal. It's like, yeah, great idea, but I'm not.
I don't feel it.
You didn't get my memo. and
I am the exception.
I'm so special. I'm the exception. But I really saw it when I came across the principles. There was no doubt that I was equal to everybody else. And that was probably one of the major factors in helping me not, you know, get rid of that codependent thinking. You know, it's I am equal to everyone else. And then the other one was separate realities. Because I think what happens is you can think, how could somebody do that? How could somebody treat me that way? It must mean there's something wrong with me. And when you see, it's like, no, they are just behaving on a feeling they're getting from their thinking. And it's them, it's theirs. It's not anything to do with you. It doesn't mean I abuse you or I lie to you or I cheat on you because there's something wrong with you anymore. It's like, no, they're just choosing that behavior because that makes sense to them in that moment. It has no bearing on you.
That's really, you know, that's very subtle, but it's, you know, it's, the word pernicious comes to mind, you know, because that's often just a little area there. That's where the narcissistic subtleties play out, that, you know, it looks like it's my fault that I'm doing this, you know, or it's because of me you're like that. You know, it's because of me you're cheating. It's because of me you're manipulative. It's because of me that you're abusing me. It's because of me that you're exuding all of these behaviors. Yeah. And it's so subtle.
No, exactly. I mean, you know, I totally took it to mean that I was not good enough. You know, if I had been, you know, whatever, you know, I mean, it started as a young child. If I'd been, you know, pretty enough, clever enough, anything enough, then my father would have paid attention to me, you know, or wanted to, you know, own me as his child. I mean, I would pass him on the street and he wouldn't even look at me. I mean, that's how you know, I didn't meet him till I was 30, or talk to him rather. But I carried that thinking through time. And so if somebody, as I said, screamed at me or verbally abused me or cheated on me, it was like, well, obviously it's because I'm not good enough. There was just no question in my mind.
Wow.
And to carry that, you know, plus you're often being told that that's the reason. So, but it sticks. It's like,
because
yes,
you were drawn to the very thing you thought you were missing in your life.
Absolutely.
Which was that dominant personality, and this is the second time today I've had a conversation with clients this morning about the same thing, you know, about the echo chamber of confirmation, for the want of a better description. I am broken, and I seek out somebody who's stronger. The irony is indeed in the echo chamber, we don't realize that what we're doing is we're drawing into the life the very person that we're trying to avoid in our life. But without realizing it, we're actually inviting them in. And that in itself is, without any understanding, is almost creating that confirmation bias. The confirmation of, I am less, I am unworthy. This is the best I deserve in this life.
Yeah, well, exactly. And there's two things that go on there too. I think that sort of illusion of strength and power, when you come into a relationship with that feeling of, I'm lacking, there's things wrong with me. Oh my God, you complete me. You're strong and powerful and confident.
I don't.
Yeah, the classic, exactly. And the illusion is that projection of power, strength, confidence is hiding a very insecure, afraid person. But we don't see that. We just see this illusion of what we feel is missing in ourselves. And without a doubt, I definitely drew in, you know, I obviously thought I was a second-class citizen, and I drew in a relationship that reminded me of that every day.
Confirmation bias. You are right. I am less.
Yes, I am less.
And yes, you are less because I've said so.
Thank you for reminding me what I already knew. But, you know, it's all so funny. And that's what I love about this. It's all so funny.
I know we make light of it, and it is, you know, because for those of us that have been through it and we're out the other side of it, we recognize the lightness of life that really is in existence. But when we're in the middle of it, you know, and I suppose it's fair to just about to say, we're not making a feck of anybody that's in the middle of this, because we get it. Why do we get how traumatizing it is to be involved in a relationship like that? What we're saying is that when you're out the other, what you're looking is at two people who get it, who understand it, who've moved through it, who are out the other side of it, and whole life so much lighter now.
Oh, that's so true, and I love that you're pointing that out, because absolutely, and that's why I think it's so important for me anyway. You know, when I coach clients, it's like, I've been there, me too. I've like hung on to the leg of a man that was trying to leave me. I think one of my first boyfriends, oh my God.
Oh,
no. And, you know, as he's like, and I remember the words he said to me, it's so funny. And then he said to me, you should never have changed. Where was the spunky fighting girl that I first met a couple of years ago? And I remember thinking, but you beat her out of me, and now you're leaving me? Because I thought by changing, it's what he wanted, but he didn't. He wanted what he first met. And I remember thinking in that moment, oh my God, I will never lose myself again in a relationship. Well, that did not happen. I lost myself.
Until the next one.
Well, I would flip-flop. I would do the pendulum. I was one of those people that had such low self-esteem. I can't remember which comedian it was, but it was like, I wouldn't want to belong to a club that would want me. And it would be the same in a relationship. It's like, if somebody wanted me, it must mean that you have something really wrong with you, or you have really low standards, or you have really bad taste. So I would be dismissive of those men that were lovely and loving and wanted to love me. And I was attracted to the ones that were difficult, moody, hard to, you know, please, because that was where my comfort zone was. I wasn't comfortable with being loved. I was comfortable with yearning and seeking love. What I use the word love loosely.
No, yeah. Well, I suppose seeking comfort as opposed to seeking love perhaps might be the right, if I'm just to put a word on it. But it is so, you just, with the word love in a narcissistic relationship, don't go.
Yeah.
They don't go together.
Mm-hmm.
They don't, because the narcissistic trait is really, as we would, this is the word in Irish, okay, we would say Mayfain, which would be myself. And if somebody said he's a bit of a Mayfainer, you know what I mean? In other words, it's all about him. And it's actually a lovely way to sometimes, but this would be the word that I would, you know, if somebody Irish was listening to this would say, a narcissist is ultimately a May Feiner. It's all about him. That's it. Or all about her, because this is totally neutral, gender neutral, because it happens in both. Relatively to this conversation, it was you attracting the narcissistic male, but that doesn't preclude women from being narcissists either.
And you know what? This is such an interesting point, because classically it has always been more men, and I think there's a cultural reason behind that. You know, go back into the 50s. I think, you know, prior to the 50s, women were encouraged to be loving, giving, nurturing, stay at home, the caretaker. Sorry, I've got allergies here. And but as women are more in the workforce, and as our culture has become more narcissistic, especially, we were talking about Hollywood earlier, my time in Hollywood. I mean, you know, that's the ripe haven for narcissism is right there. And in our politics, as we also mentioned. So there, as more women are in those roles of power and prestige and that, there is actually, it's leveling off more. There still tends to be slightly more males than females. Yes. But, you know, I'm obviously, you know, my sort of relationship was with men. So when I refer to narcissism, it often goes into men, but 100% women and men can act out these tendencies. And like you're saying with that sort of, I love the Irish word, which I will not be able to repeat, but when it's it's all about me, is because there is that bottomless pit. There is that absolute hole inside of fill me up, fill me up, fill me up, you know, and we all know that one. It's and actually can go for codependence too, that they have that bottomless pit too.
Yeah, but codependence, as I would see it, kind of, its behavior is neediness.
It's neediness.
You know, neediness, needy.
Yes,
there's always it's neediness, and it's in that sense it's the weakness of, you know, of not having the self-belief and strength, you know, and their own natural strength and resilience, and that innateness that's in all of us.
Yeah,
kind of, you often see it as a neediness, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting because it can be experienced and felt that way, but often, again, what gets a codependent into a relationship with a narcissist is they often grow up feeling like their needs are not important. So they develop this sort of false persona of needless and wantless. I'm fine. I don't need and want anything, but I can give 100% to you because I don't need anything. And so sneaky.
I'm laughing because I only had a conversation a couple of days ago with somebody about this particular thing.
Yeah.
When I asked them the question, when is it time to love yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And it just literally stopped the whole conversation. Mm-hmm. They literally kind of, because it never occurred to them to stop. No, I never twigged. And this is why it just opened up when you said it can often also exude itself as the selflessness. I don't need anything. You know, I'm here to serve, mm-hmm. to the point of death almost. You did to over-sacrifice themselves.
Yes, totally.
And I never quite recognized that as a codependent trait, a codependent behavior. And it was only when you said that, and I went, geez, that was exactly the conversation I was having the other day. And I said, when is it time to love yourself?
Yeah.
And when is it time to serve yourself?
It's so true, because a lot of people with codependency issues, they grow up believing that number one, they have to negate themselves to secure love. I have to sort of, as I said, show up with no needs, no wants. That way somebody will love and appreciate me and not abandon me. So the motivation is to secure love and not be abandoned, which, you know, is quite tragic when you think about it. So it's all about being valued for what you do, not who you are.
Yeah.
So it's the giving and the giving and the giving will make them feel that there's somebody. Whereas when we know the principles, we know we're somebody without doing a damn thing. We can be sitting on the couch and just being in bliss and knowing that we're enough. And we don't have to keep, you know, on this treadmill of securing love. And you know, and so yeah, it's very interesting.
Isn't it? You know, you're tapping into the wellspring of what's available to every human being.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime when I'm having these conversations, and sometimes, and I've remarked on it with clients, or if these conversations come up, and I would say, yes, of course I'm bringing in all of these people, but you'll find that virtually all of them would have had an experience playing out in their lives that it was so moving to them, or damage to them, or misunderstanding them, that you find that they made it their life's mission to turn this into something that they could serve other people with, to draw them out of it. That it's not reserved for the few that you will hear me talking to, or whatever. What we are talking about is innate to absolutely every human being, unequivocally.
Absolutely.
Period. There is no gray area, there is no color area, there's no gender area, there's no sexuality area. There is nothing here that isn't available to absolutely every human being. Period.
Yeah. It is. It's remarkable. I think I mentioned I joined a couple of Facebook groups and on codependency and narcissism, and just to sort of see what was going on. And it's quite honestly, I can read one post and it's devastating. But what I also noticed was this absolute belief that you're broken for life, that you'll never recover. And because it's based on, you know, a lot of it is based on the 12-step program. And I remember one of my first forays into a group, somebody was desperate, and I replied with something like, I'm really, you know, one of the conditions is being loving and supportive. So I was like so loving and supportive, and I was like, there's nothing wrong with you.
It's don't just, say that.
I got kicked out. I got blocked. It's like I was being loving. I was like, no need to feel shame. So you just went back for another look. That's okay. But moving forward, know that you're not broken, and you've just, you know, have this.
So did you start gaslighting her? Were you, because that's what happened to me. I got the narcissist and I went, what? Because I was part of one of these groups. I tend to stay away from them now because I'm too happy. I'm too goddamn positive. You know, and you know, I'm the last person to need a ray of sunshine. This is just the right, you know, they'll sizzle in the daylight with it. And I was in one of these groups of a very, very well-known author who's written books on counseling, etc. And I had read one of their books and was able to answer the entrance questions, a couple of questions, you know, and I passed the test, and in I went. Okay, so anyway, I'm in there and I'm lurking for a week or 10 days, and I'm reading it and I'm stuff, and I'm just trying to get a vibe for how people are talking in the group and whatever. And the more I read, the more I saw these people entrenched in the trauma. And what I found with it then was, like I said about the echo chamber, we tend to create echo chambers when we don't understand. So we'll seek out that which confirms our beliefs, whether they're traumatic, whether they're codependent or whatever. If we don't understand how that game is playing out within us, like I said, the unfolding of it, we find ourselves looking for the confirmation bias that there is something wrong with us. Yeah, and it's okay. So now I've 10,000 other people who are agreeing with me. Okay, so I'm in this group and I was going, boys, like, is anybody say you can recover? Because it's going on and it's scrolling down through it. And so anyway, this woman puts up a post, and now I spoke openly about this. Now it's never been a secret for the want of it. It's a surprise to people when I spoke about it first, because my mother and my father were business people, and they were very well known within the locality. And my mother was an amazing woman. Hand on heart, she was an amazing woman. And when I arrived on the scene, it was kind of well into she was in her mid-40s, and they were in the middle of building the business, and she had been through so much, which I understood later on. You know, she'd lost 2 babies, 2 cystic fibrosis, and everything. The family home burned down, the business got lost, and they had to rebuild everything. And, you know, so a lot went on. And my mother, going back to her life, I began to see her dynamic play out or whatever. So when I fell into the principles originally around the end of 2012, start of 2013, it was also around the time we started to mind my mother. You know, myself, my siblings. And I remember the first couple of nights, my turn during the week to sit there with my mother and kind of going, what the fuck am I doing here? I don't really know this woman, you know, and she's my mother and I've had a relationship and I'm kind of, you know, respectful, I'll do all that thing. But I didn't feel it. You know. And I began just as I started to shift through, well, I'm doing my best. You know, that, you know, when we start to see the innocence of our own actions and recognize how we were doing things and how we were pulling ourselves back and forth inside, they were going to go, well, actually, because you didn't understand, you were operating innocently. That's okay. It's okay to let it go now, or whatever. Then I kind of went, oh, my mother was doing her best. And so it opened up this enormous wave of love. Yeah. It was magnificent, you know. And so when my mother passed, our relationship was beautiful. It was complete in every possible way. Even though she had dementia, it was just undeniable. Dementia, as I discovered, affects the intellect, but never the heart.
Yeah.
Never the heart. You can't rob love. I don't care. It can rob the intellect, but it cannot rob love. It's just not possible. And so this contributor in this group starts to tell this whole story. So, you know, God, I could feel her pain, you know, and she said, so I start writing, and I write this incredible story, and I tell the story, you know, and about a half an hour later, this moderator comes in. Oh my God. By the time she was finished with me, I was a narcissist, I was a gaslighter, I was everything, because I wouldn't hold the space for her, okay? Yeah. But that wasn't what the post was about. I wasn't being asked to hold the space. She was asking me, did anybody else ask in the post, did people have an experience of this and how did it work out for them, etc.? So I was literally, I saw the invitation and I went after it. So this, and then this one who was a regular contributor came in, and she had to have her tuppence worth as well. And I could see the whole thing grinding. So the moderator, I could hear her story. So I said, I'll hold my ground here and I'll see what will happen. And so I held my ground, and eventually it started to become clear that she was on a campaign to rid the world of secondary and tertiary trauma, which I didn't know even existed as a concept until she told me. So I said, will you please explain that to me? And in relation to what I said about hope and love and understanding, and when we understand what's going on for us, how we can see it in others, and how we find a way to move forward in our life. So anyway, she gave me this, and so what I did was, I'm amazed by this woman. You know, she really was very personal towards me. So I went on to her Facebook page, and I was just scrolling down through it, and I was reading her posts. And from August the year before was a section from a book that this group is based on, from the author of this book, that is based on, and it literally told the story of love and forgiveness and understanding and how to move forward. And it was, it only had to insert my mother's name.
Yeah.
And this moderator had actually posted this. But yet when it came to actually experiencing and the playing out of it in actuality, she was more attached to the story of the trauma that she had gone on, and I couldn't get over it. And so I linked it, and I said, this is from the group, this is from the author of this particular group, this is literally, and this was now a day later, 2 days later, and I said, what part of this that you posted on your Facebook page yourself as word verbatim a page from the book about, you know, what's different. I say it's almost word for word what I wrote about my relationship with my mother, etc. I got kicked out of the group.
Oh, you got kicked out too? Oh, we have to have our own group. Just the two.
Where is that? And it struck me then about the danger of Facebook groups and the danger of the echo chamber. Yeah. You know,
oh God, that's so, I thought it was going to have a great end. I thought you were going to say that she was like, oh my God, thank you for, you know, showing me that again. But you're right. It's yeah. And all that told me too was I need to start my own. And I did. I started my own Facebook group, private Facebook group, Finding Freedom from Codependency Through the Principles. Would I
put that link up? Would you put that link up in the post underneath this as well, please, if you don't mind, if you want to invite people into it?
Yeah, wonderful. Yes, because like you say, you just look at all of this suffering that you know doesn't have to continue. I have so much compassion for what you've been through. Absolutely, you know.
It's 100%.
But there is a way out, and life is beautiful, and it's fun and exciting, and oh my God, it's night and day, absolutely night and day. So
this morning at 7:30, I was out for my walk, and I met somebody that I wouldn't know, you know, but I wouldn't be a passing acquaintance with, and they were out for their walk, and we got talking about this, and they were saying that they had been seeing some of my stuff, and they said, but how is it different for you, or whatever, you know? And I said, well, let me put it to you this way. Everything in my life is exactly the same, but my experience of everything being is entirely different now.
Yeah.
The connection to it is entirely different. And like I described it to somebody that it's like, you know, when you work from Monday to Friday and you can't wait for the Saturday morning feeling, you're waking up on Monday and Tuesday with the same feeling. It's the Saturday feeling all week long.
Yeah, that's so gorgeous. It's like when I had my first child, I remember it was so clear to me. I had this vision of, it's almost like I'd lived in this black and white, you know, world, you know, like a black and white movie. And I'd literally, by giving birth, I'd literally gone through a door into this technicolor, you know, mind-blowing sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, almost like a Disney cartoon, birds flying, everything's gorgeous. But it was the difference between night and day of that doorway into real love. I always say that my first child, because prior to that, relationships were battlegrounds that I was just trying to navigate. I can't say there was ever true love. There was a lot of infatuation and lust and whatever was going on, messy relationships. But my son taught me what real love was. And it's the same. I feel the same way with the 3 principles. It was like it went from a doorway into a whole other world. I mean, I had always described myself as shy and as an introvert and painfully shy. I was painfully ashamed is what it really was. I was trying to hide. But when I came across this understanding, it's like, yeah, of course I still get the thinking, oh, you know, whatever. But I would never be sitting here if it wasn't for this understanding. I'd still be hiding. I would never be into some amazing people every week. I would be hiding. But there was just that reconnecting with what I call, it's like the nudge, you know, like we can have a lot of thinking up here and planning, but wisdom.
Great way to describe it, because there you go.
Nudges me. It's like it comes from a different place in me. I'm like,
it does, yeah. There's a there you go.
Me? Really? Yeah. And it's like,
so. You know, isn't it amazing? It occurred to me, Dale, while you were talking there, that having been through so much, you know, suffering, because we are talking about human suffering here,
Mm-hmm.
you know, in the depth of relationship, but our own suffering, and, you know, within these circumstances, that you find yourself in a situation all these years later, being able to revisit all of that with somebody else, but never have the suffering.
Oh yeah.
That is just, you know, and I it's only very recently I've seen, oh my God, Sid Banks is right, you know, just because part of my story for decades was all the trouble and all the pain and all the violence and all the abuse and all of that stuff when I was, you know, in my formative years into about 14, 15. And for a long time, that was really, every time I look back at I blamed all of my agony and my beliefs and my misunderstandings on that. But when that started to fall away, all the other good stuff that happened in my life suddenly started to fill the spaces. I had a shit childhood, I had this childhood, I had that. But when we start to look back, the pain has gone. They're accepted as just part of our past. That's it. They're a memory, but they're not. They're just there. They have their place on the timeline of my life, for the want of a better description. But the feeling of them has gone completely. And what replaced them was memories of and I wrote about it only 2 weeks ago, memories of my childhood and the friendships that I made, that I actually made at school, even though that I was living through a hell, it appeared, for 2 years. I still formed really deep bonds with guys that I still have 40 plus years later. You know, I mean, wow, like, do you know what I'm trying to say to you? That's not all that bad. And when I was listening to, you know, the gift of being able to for somebody to come to you and you can sit with him in love without ever, you can be there and you can go through every single step of their way knowing one thing: you're gonna be all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're gonna be all right, you know, because we're there, and being able to revisit it without ever, it's just the story now.
I look back on mine. It just was a wild and wacky ride. I mean, it really was. It was not a conventional childhood by any means, but there was so much, you know, there was chaos. There was a ton of stuff, you know, abuse and sexual abuse, but I look back on it with such gratitude for all of it, because it helps me be a better coach.
Yeah.
I also see, as you said, I see the beauty in, you know, there were 7 of us and we were like little vagabonds. We just ran around, no shoes on, picking blackberries and gooseberries off hedges. And, you know, it was, you know, I didn't have a father. My mother was really busy taking care of all these mentally ill people that she created business around. And so we were just left to our own devices, but there was so much beauty in that.
Yeah.
I mean, I look at other people that, you know, grew up in a, you know, conventional way, and I'm thinking, whoa, I am so lucky. I had a really interesting childhood.
I was very wayward. This was my big issue with my mother at the start, because she'd be up in the morning and she'd go into the bedroom and I was gone. I was 5 on my bike.
Yeah.
My mother would get a phone call and I was like 7 miles away. Whistling had gone off of my bike. And it frightened her. Yeah. It frightened her. Because she was trying really hard to protect me and what she thought was the right thing to do. You know what I mean? And that's what kind of at the time started that process, you know, and I laugh at it now. You know, and I mean, and I can say, well, geez, like, you know, as a father myself, I would be worried if my 5 or 6 year old was getting on a bike and fecking off for a cycle at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. But I was that kind of an exuberant child, you know, it just was, you know, and I look back but at the time, we talk about abandonment. You're talking about rejection. And that was the story that I started to tell myself back then. Not a word of it true, but based on my rudimentary understanding of life. Because we don't really at that stage have any real depth of understanding. It's very the innocence, and even though it's often referred to in the principles, the innocence and the exuberance of children. what's often lost is that as we get older, we also, the powers of discernment is also very, very important as we get older. It's, you know, sometimes I feel it can get lost in the story. But it was so easy for me to create a belief of abandonment and the beliefs of rejection, and thinking my mother wasn't loving me and because she wouldn't let me be away with a 6-year-old boy, you know, and she had to rein me in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, and like and it's the subtlety to how quickly and how a misunderstanding, a simple little misunderstanding, like I refer to as the grit gets stuck in the machine.
Mm-hmm.
It's caused it to, and eventually it starts to wear.
I love what you're pointing to, because it really is. Sometimes it's harder sometimes to identify, like you said, those beliefs that we start to have when it's so subtle. Yeah, you know, now as adults and especially as parents, we can look back and go, oh my God, she'd lost 2 children. She just didn't want to lose you. She just was overprotective or over-controlling or whatever it was. And we can look back and see the psychological innocence of that. But I often think as children, you know, I think this is what happened for me anyway, and I think it's quite common, is rather than look at parents as being wrong, or not wrong is a hard word, but I'll use it in my example, rather than look at my father and think to myself, you know, he can't or won't love me. That's really hard for a young child to sort of live with. They want fantasy. They want to sort of think that that's not a hard and fact rule. So I know in my little mind, it was like, well, if I'm the one to blame and I change myself and I become perfect, then I can change the story. And that's where that started to set in for me, was if I keep finding the fault in me and getting rid of it and perfecting it, then I can make my father love me. And that was so innocent, so innocent. But I can see that that was a better story to tell myself than
at the time.
He was not interested. You know?
But it was better at the time, because
Well,
it
exactly.
had to see, this is what I see. It was at the time, it kind of made sense of all these emotions and all of this stuff, which was fine at the time. But then as we get older,
yes,
it doesn't serve us anymore. And
exactly.
Suddenly what kind of served us for a little bit of time to make sense of all this overwhelming feelings and emotions that were going on, and kind of served us to kind of manage through and muddle through a darker period, doesn't serve us then when we're in our late teens or 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. And that's, and when you said this earlier on about going back in and having a little bit of a rummage around, it's based on what the person is feeling now and experiencing now, not going back to try and fix the past.
Sure.
But what is it that you're feeling right now, just in this moment? Let's make sense of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're carrying, we have, without ever being told that we can jettison that belief, you know, like we did with Santa Claus or whatever, because we told Santa, and we jettisoned it and moved on. The other stuff that we learned was far more subtle, and nobody ever informed us to say, well, that's actually a belief.
Yeah.
And you can jettison it. And the problem is you're trying to believe in something magical that happened back 35, 40 years ago, and you're trying to use it to make sense of your life now. And it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. And that, when I saw that I had just kind of created that dynamic that far back, and why at 35 and 40 and 45, it was bringing a lot of pain into my life.
Yeah, I see it as a splinter sometimes, a splinter that's festered. And it, you know, so I do think it's sort of, because it's alien to us, it doesn't belong in us. So it's festering somewhere. So I think being able to go, oh, here's the splinter, let's take it out there. And then you just heal from it. That's it. There's no need to keep digging for the splinter and is anything left of the splinter, or let's go back in there again. It's like, nope, let's pick that out. It was an erroneous belief system that you somehow made sense when you were younger. Absolutely is not the truth of who we are, doesn't belong in you, is causing pain and anguish. Let's as you say, just eject it, get it out of there, and then live the life we're meant to live.
And heal.
Yeah, and heal.
And allow it to heal.
Yeah.
Be patient, because the effects of it sometimes take a little bit of time to work its way back through the system. And, I love the way you described it as a splinter, because one of my drums, that I love to bang about all of this is that the more we avoid pain, the longer we prolong suffering.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
The more we avoid pain, the longer we prolong suffering. It's so much easier to pull the splinter out. It may hurt, but it's so much easier just to pull it out, because that's it. It's done. It's gone. Now you can heal, regardless of how the healing shows up. You're in the process of healing. But until you go splinter out, you're going to do your best to massage it, to protect it, to cover it, to hide it. And this is where the shame, and when somebody asks me, what does that mean? Well, then this is where we create the stories of shame, or embarrassment, or lack of self-confidence. We create this incredible story around that particular splinter to try and make sense of it. But the moment you say, well, actually, it's okay to pull out the splinter.
Yeah.
It's okay to be hurt. It's okay.
And what's coming up for me as you're sharing that is, when you were talking about the covering up, it is that defensiveness when you feel that there's something so wrong with you. There's this defense you have to build up.
Yeah, it's true.
I caught the tail end of you sharing, I can't remember who you were talking to, it was either Nicola or Sheila, about a situation on Facebook that you basically talked about. Instead of just leaving it, you dealt with it. And I don't know the whole, but what was coming up when I was listening to that was like, oh my God, how this is what this understanding gives us. There's nothing to defend. When we just know that we are beautiful spiritual beings bumbling around in this world of form.
Just to condense it, then, I made an arse of myself,
But that the little human part of you, the little sort of expression of who you are at your essence, might have done something that made a fool of you. But
I can tell you, my initial thought was correct. Wisdom, it was just say, take this down. It's overheating the situation. But no. I know better.
Are your humanness? I love it.
And I did something, it hurt beyond no illusions that when I realized what I had done, I was genuinely devastated by it. Because even though I absolutely respect the sentiment of where I came from for a sizable chunk of it, but it was around the matter of Black Lives Matter and all of that stuff. But what happened was I played the man and not the ball. I didn't stay with the subject matter, which I feel incredibly strongly about. You cannot tackle the prejudices of another human being until you're willing to tackle your own prejudices first, in whatever form that takes. I'm really clear about that. And so I suppose I was swept up in the emotion of this, and then I shot from the hip then, like, even though when I started out, like I was just saying, this needs to just be taken down. Everybody needs to calm down and step back. Of course, the more I started to type in, the more I got swept up in it. All right. Yeah. And so then I kind of went, I'm going to give him a piece of my mind now that I'm at it. You know what I mean? And that's what happened.
But I love what you're pointing to, which is we can own this stuff because there's nothing to be ashamed of anymore. We know that as humans, we get caught up. We say silly things. We just do. But before I used to think, God, I got to defend that. I got to hide it. That's shameful. I can't admit I'm wrong. Whereas with this understanding, it's like, yeah, me too. We all fall flat on our face. We all say stupid things. It's just part of being human. That's all that happens.
And that's so important.
Yeah.
A part of that lesson, and I said this afterwards, I can't ask or expect a client of mine to acknowledge their pain if I'm not willing to do it myself. I'm not willing to live by my own word. And in that moment, that this started to play out. If I went into, like you say, into that defensive mode, I would then have had to unhook myself from the group and lots of people that I love and care about and value their opinions and value their input into questions and stuff. And and every time I think about it, I'd be going, oh, I'd be shuffling away quietly, you know what I mean, mortified. But instead, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
This was mea culpa. I lost sight of the big picture here. And in that moment of humanness, this is what happened. And I laid the whole lot out. And I surrendered to understanding and wisdom that at some stage, something, and that happened 2 days later. I had the most extraordinary experience with my best friend then out for a walk. And it was that part of that moment where I recognized while we were down by the river, going for a walk, the first time I walked across that field was 45 years ago. And I learned to swim there. And I smoked there. And I kissed girls there. And, and all that stuff started to show up. And it was just so beautiful. And when I arrived, I was really bummed out by it. And by the time, by the whole week, I was just so upset by my own behavior at the time. And I was swept up and I was feeling contrite and whatever. But it was in that instant walking across the field, I just went, oh, wow. And I was transported back 45 years. And all the memories and the happiness and the laughter, and we chuckled and we told stories about it, and it was done. It was over. Just in that moment, that was how love filled me back up. And I walked back up afterwards, and I said it to him that this wasn't just a pleasant thing for me. That my heart and my soul felt full, replenished. I didn't try to go, and I didn't try, and I'm sure there's anybody here what's going on, but I think my twin boys are having a round the background inside the kitchen. So sorry, everybody. But so the whole thing just replenished itself, Del, and this is the point I'm coming to, that when we surrender, when we understand our humanness, when we understand that sometimes we do drop the ball, sometimes that we do stupid things. Yeah. We get swept up in emotion, we get lost, that we can find our way back.
Yeah, and it's so important, if we want to see the psychological innocence in others, we've got to see it in ourselves first. We've got to give ourselves a break.
Oh, I was such an idiot. I really was. It was one of the commentators said afterwards, and I thought it was so true. The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
I missed that. What was that?
The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Oh.
Yeah. And there it is. But listen, Dad, I need to say this to you.
Yes.
We're on it an hour and 10 minutes. Like I told you at the start of this, I failed miserably to rein this into 30 minutes. And I think it's very important to state that we're an hour and 10 minutes in. Now, I have no problem continuing, but, I respect your time, and I understand it's the morning time all the way across the other side of the broad Atlantic foam, to Malibu, which sounds wonderfully exotic and beautiful and glamorous and
no, it's not. It's just the mountains roll into the ocean. I live it's like rural. People go, how could you go from Wales to Malibu? And I'm like, it's actually very similar. It's countryside. It's, it's beautiful. Yes,
we see the television. We all think we're missing something for not living in Malibu. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you got to sell the place now. Don't be downplaying it, because we all have seen telly. We all think.
Yeah, well, I used to do these meet me in Malibus.
I see that on your website. Yeah. Actually, no, because I'm conscious of time, and we'll put it up. If people are looking for you, Del, how are they going to find you, and what's available to them, we'll say?
Okay, so they can find me through my website, deladeyjones.com, all one word, no hyphens or spaces, or email me, deladeyjones@gmail.com. or you can watch my shows every Tuesday. I usually, I go through a studio, UBN Studios,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just as easy to watch them on my Facebook page, Insightful Conversations. And yeah, I do coaching packages, mentoring, and intensives and programs, and they're all on the website. So you can find
Brilliant.
them there.
At Adey-Jones.com. Right.
.com.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
Hold
Well,
tough for me. Don't disappear for a second. I'm just going to say goodbye, and then we'll. I hope this, for everybody that has been watching this or is going to watch this, I hope this was as informative for you as it was for me, because narcissism, in my experience and in my life, and I think in the life of so many people, is insidious, and it is often not easily recognizable. And I hope today, with the conversation with Del, that somehow we've maybe helped you identify maybe the traits that are in a relationship with codependency or narcissism, and that, as Del said, there is a door out. There is a door out, both physically and psychologically, into well-being. And we hope that we've given you something to see, that out the other side of these types of relationships is a wonderful life, full of joy and full of happiness and full of humanness and full of balls being dropped and picked back up. But life, and the quality of life and the experience of life, is far more than what you're experiencing right now. So feel free to reach out to me, feel free to reach out to Del at Adey-Jones, and I'll see you tomorrow evening. Thank you all for joining me so much. Bye for now.